Captain Jake Morrison stood at the window of his ship and looked down at the planet below. The world was beautiful, with purple oceans and silver cities that sparkled in the sunlight. This was Zephyr Prime, home to the Zephyrian people. Jake had never seen anything like it in his 10 years of space travel. "Captain, we're ready to land," said Dr. Lisa Parker, walking up behind him. She was the team's expert on alien cultures. Her job was to make sure humans didn't accidentally start wars by doing the wrong thing. Jake nodded and turned away from the window. "How are you feeling about this, Lisa? First contact with a new species is always tricky." Lisa looked worried. She had been reading about Zephyrian culture for months. They're warriors, Jake. Everything they do is about honor and strength. They settle arguments with fights. They've been doing it for thousands of years. "Well, we're here to make friends, not fight," Jake said with a smile. "How hard can it be?" The ship landed in a large courtyard made of smooth black stone. Jake could see hundreds of Zephyrians waiting for them. They were tall, at least 7 feet, with blue scales covering their skin. They wore bright armor and carried weapons that glowed with energy. Jake straightened his blue diplomatic uniform and checked his appearance one last time. He wanted to look good for this important meeting. With him were Lisa, Communications Officer, Amy Foster, and Security Chief Ryan Bell. They were the best team Earth had to offer. The ship's door opened and Jake stepped out first. The air was warm and smelled like flowers. A red carpet had been laid out from the ship to a huge palace made of crystal and metal. Zephyrian guards stood in perfect lines on both sides. As they walked toward the palace, Amy whispered, "Jake, they're all staring at us." "Of course they are," Jake whispered back. "We're probably the first humans they've ever seen." The palace doors were 30 feet tall and covered in gold designs. They opened smoothly as the human team approached. Inside, the ceiling was so high, Jake couldn't see the top. Thousands of Zephyrians filled the great hall, all watching the humans with curious eyes. At the far end of the hall sat a massive throne made of blue crystal. On it sat the Zephyrian Emperor, a giant even by his people's standards. Next to him stood a female Zephyrian who took Jake's breath away. She was tall and graceful, with scales that shimmered like jewels. Her armor was silver and gold, and she carried herself like someone who had never lost a fight. This had to be Princess Lyra Veltar, the Emperor's daughter and heir to the throne. Lisa leaned close to Jake. "Remember, the red carpet is sacred to them. It represents the blood of their ancestors. We must show respect." Jake nodded. As they walked down the long hall, he could feel thousands of eyes watching every step. The carpet was soft under his feet, and he could see intricate patterns woven into the red fabric. When they reached the throne, Jake stopped and bowed as Lisa had taught him. "Your Majesty, I am Captain Jake Morrison of Earth. We come in peace, hoping to build friendship between our peoples." The Emperor's voice was deep and powerful. "Welcome, humans. I am Emperor Veltar. This is my daughter, Princess Lyra, who will one day rule our people." Princess Lyra stepped forward. Up close, Jake could see that her eyes were golden, like sunlight, through amber. "Humans," she said, her voice musical but strong. "We have heard stories about your species. Some say you are weak because you avoid fighting. Others say you are clever. We will see which is true." Jake smiled. "We prefer to solve problems with words rather than weapons, Your Highness. But that doesn't make us weak." "Words," the princess repeated as if the idea was strange to her. "We shall see." The ceremony continued with speeches and the exchange of gifts. Jake gave the Emperor a crystal sculpture from Earth, while the Emperor presented Jake with a sword made of Zephyrian metal that could cut through almost anything. Everything was going well until the moment Jake made his mistake. As they walked back toward the ship, Jake was feeling good about how the meeting had gone. He was thinking about the successful mission and not paying attention to where he was walking. He stepped slightly to the left to avoid bumping into Amy. His foot landed squarely on the sacred red carpet. The entire hall went silent. Jake looked around, confused by the sudden change in atmosphere. Every Zephyrian in the room was staring at him with expressions of shock and anger. Lisa grabbed his arm. "Jake," she whispered urgently, "you just stepped on the sacred carpet. In their culture, that's like spitting on their ancestors' graves." Princess Lyra's golden eyes blazed with fury. She drew her energy sword, and the blade hummed with deadly power. "Human," she shouted, her voice echoing through the hall. "You have insulted our ancestors. You have dishonored our most sacred tradition." Jake raised his hands. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "Silence," the princess commanded. "There is only one way to restore honor after such an insult. I challenge you to ritual combat. Tomorrow at dawn we will duel to the death." The crowd erupted in cheers. Zephyrians loved a good fight, and they hadn't seen royal combat in years. Jake looked at Lisa desperately. She was pale and shaking her head. There was no way out of this. In Zephyrian culture, refusing a duel challenge meant war between their species. Princess Lyra pointed her sword at Jake. "Prepare yourself, human. Tomorrow we discover if your people are truly as weak as they appear." As the human team was escorted to guest quarters, Jake realized that one wrong step had just turned their peaceful diplomatic mission into a fight for survival. Tomorrow, he would face a trained warrior princess who could probably kill him with her bare hands. And the fate of human-Zephyrian relations hung in the balance. Jake didn't sleep much that night. He sat in his guest room staring out the window at the 3 moons hanging in the purple sky. Tomorrow morning he would have to fight Princess Lyra in front of thousands of Zephyrians. The problem was Jake had never been much of a fighter. Lisa paced back and forth across the room. She had been reading Zephyrian law books all night looking for a way out. "There has to be something," she muttered. "Some rule or tradition we can use." Amy sat at the desk, trying to send messages back to Earth. "I've contacted headquarters," she said. "They're sending backup, but the nearest ship is 3 weeks away." Ryan checked his weapons for the 10th time. "Captain, maybe I could fight in your place." "I have military training." Jake shook his head. "No, Ryan. She challenged me specifically. If I send someone else, it will be seen as cowardice. That would make things even worse." As the sun began to rise, casting golden light through the crystal walls, Lisa finally gave up her search. "I'm sorry, Jake, there's no way around it. Zephyrian honor code is very clear. You have to fight her." Jake stood up and put on his diplomatic uniform. He had decided not to wear armor or carry weapons. If he was going to die, he would die as himself, a human who believed in peace. The arena was a huge circular space carved into solid rock. Thousands of Zephyrians filled the seats, all eager to watch the duel. The noise was incredible. Cheering, shouting, and the sound of feet stomping on stone. Emperor Veltar sat on a special throne overlooking the arena. Next to him were other important Zephyrians, all wearing their finest clothes and armor. Jake walked into the center of the arena. The ground was covered with white sand that would soon be stained with blood. He looked up at the crowd and waved. Some Zephyrians cheered, others booed. They were excited to see how this strange human would fight. A horn sounded and Princess Lyra entered from the opposite side. Jake's breath caught in his throat. She was magnificent in her battle armor, which covered her from head to toe in plates of silver and gold. Her helmet had a crest like a dragon's head, and her cape flowed behind her like liquid fire. In her hands, she carried 2 energy swords that crackled with blue lightning. Each weapon was longer than Jake was tall, and he could feel the heat from them even across the arena. The princess walked to the center and faced Jake. Through her helmet's visor, he could see her golden eyes burning with determination. "Human," she called out, her voice amplified so everyone could hear. "You have insulted my people. Today you will pay for your dishonor with your life." An old Zephyrian priest walked between them. He raised his staff and began to speak in the ancient language. Jake couldn't understand the words, but he knew this was the official beginning of the duel. The priest finished his speech and stepped back. The crowd fell silent, waiting for the violence to begin. Princess Lyra raised her swords above her head. "Fight me, human. Show me the strength of your species." Jake stood completely still. He had made his decision during the long night. He would not fight this beautiful, proud warrior. Instead, he would do something that no Zephyrian had ever seen before. The princess charged across the arena, her swords trailing blue fire. She moved like lightning, covering the distance between them in seconds. Her battle cry echoed off the stone walls. At the last moment, as the princess raised her weapons to strike, Jake did the most human thing he could think of. He opened his arms wide and stepped forward, wrapping the armored warrior in the biggest, warmest hug he had ever given anyone. Princess Lyra stopped moving completely. Her swords froze in mid-swing, just inches from Jake's head. She stood like a statue, not understanding what was happening. The crowd went silent. 10,000 Zephyrians stared in shock at the impossible scene before them. In their entire recorded history, no one had ever responded to a duel challenge with physical affection. Jake held the princess gently but firmly. He could feel her trembling inside her armor. "I'm sorry I stepped on your carpet," he whispered. "I didn't mean to disrespect your people, but I won't fight you. Violence isn't the answer to everything." Princess Lyra's weapons powered down and fell from her hands. They hit the sand with a metallic crash that seemed incredibly loud in the silent arena. "What?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What are you doing to me?" Jake smiled and squeezed her a little tighter. "It's called a hug. It's how humans show care and friendship. It's how we comfort each other when we're upset." The princess had never experienced anything like this. Her warrior training had prepared her for every possible combat situation, but no one had ever taught her what to do when an enemy offered affection instead of aggression. This is not how duels work," she said, confusion clear in her voice. "I know," Jake replied, "but maybe that's the problem. Maybe there's a better way to solve our differences." In the stands, Emperor Veltar stood up from his throne. His face showed the same confusion as his daughter. The other Zephyrian nobles whispered among themselves, trying to understand what they were witnessing. Lisa watched from the human section, her mouth hanging open. She had studied Zephyrian culture for years, but there was nothing in any book about this situation. Amy grabbed Ryan's arm. "Is the captain winning or losing?" she asked. "I have no idea," Ryan replied. "But at least he's still alive." Princess Lyra stood in Jake's embrace for what felt like hours. Slowly, very slowly, she began to relax. The tension left her muscles and she stopped trembling. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why would you do this instead of fighting? Are you not afraid to die?" Jake loosened his hug but didn't let go completely. "Of course I'm afraid, but I'm more afraid of hurting you. You're beautiful and strong and intelligent. The galaxy would be a darker place without you in it." The princess pulled back slightly so she could look at his face through her helmet's visor. "You would rather die than cause me harm?" "Yes," Jake said simply. "That's what humans do. We protect the people we care about even if we just met them." For the first time in her life, Princess Lyra didn't know what to say. She had been trained from birth to be a warrior, to solve problems with strength and violence. But this human had just shown her a completely different way of thinking. The crowd began to murmur. Some Zephyrians were angry, demanding that the duel continue. Others seemed fascinated by this strange human behavior. The younger ones were especially curious. "Emperor," Veltar finally spoke, his voice booming across the arena. "What is the meaning of this? What sorcery have you used on my daughter, human?" Jake looked up at the Emperor while still holding the princess. "No sorcery, Your Majesty. Just kindness. It's the most powerful force in the universe." The princess stepped back, removing her helmet to reveal her face. Her golden eyes were wide with wonder and confusion. "I do not understand what has happened here," she announced to the crowd. "This requires further study." And with that, she turned and walked out of the arena, leaving behind her weapons and a very confused audience. The Zephyrian High Council had been arguing for 6 hours straight. The great meeting hall echoed with angry voices as the most important leaders of their civilization tried to understand what had happened in the arena. Elder Crix Velnos, the oldest and most respected member of the council, slammed his staff on the stone floor. "Silence," he commanded. The room fell quiet. In 3,000 years of recorded history, nothing like this has ever occurred. Our sacred laws say nothing about... He struggled to find the words. Hugging, supplied Counselor Vera. Nalthos, reading from a human dictionary they had hastily obtained. The human term is hugging. It appears to be a form of physical contact used to express affection or comfort. Elder Crix made a disgusted face. Affection? To an enemy? This makes no sense. When two warriors meet in combat, one must win and one must die. That is the natural order. But the human did not fight at all, said another counselor. How can we declare a winner when no battle took place? Meanwhile, in the royal chambers, Princess Lyra sat alone in her private study. She had removed all her armor and wore a simple robe of blue silk. For the first time since the arena, she was beginning to think clearly. What the human had done to her was impossible according to everything she had been taught. Yet it had happened. She could still feel the warmth of his arms around her, the gentle way he had held her. It was completely different from anything she had ever experienced. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called. Her personal guard, Captain Zara Colvin, stepped inside. Zara had been Lyra's friend since childhood and was one of the few people who could speak freely to the princess. "The council is going crazy," Zara reported. "Half of them think the human used some kind of mind control weapon. The other half think he's the greatest coward in the galaxy." Lyra frowned. "He was not a coward. I saw his eyes. He was afraid, yes, but he chose not to fight anyway. That takes a different kind of courage." "You sound like you respect him," Zara observed. "I don't know what I feel," Lyra admitted. "Zara, have you ever touched someone who wasn't family or a lover?" Zara looked confused. "Of course not. Why would I? Physical contact is for mating or fighting. But what if it could be for something else? What if it could be for comfort?" "That's crazy talk, Lyra. You're starting to sound like those humans." In another part of the palace, Jake and his team were being held in their guest quarters. They weren't prisoners exactly, but Zephyrian guards stood outside their doors. No one seemed to know what to do with them. Lisa was still reading through cultural texts, trying to find some precedent for what had happened. "Jake, I think you may have accidentally created a new category of law. The Zephyrians literally have no rules for this situation." Amy was monitoring communications from their ship. "The Zephyrian news channels are going crazy. Some are calling you a hero, others are calling you a demon. There are protests in 3 major cities." "Protests?" Jake asked, looking up from where he sat by the window. "Some Zephyrians want to learn more about human culture," Amy explained. "Others want to declare war on Earth for corrupting their princess. It's chaos out there." Ryan cleaned his weapon nervously. "Maybe we should have just fought her. At least then we'd know where we stand." "No," Jake said firmly. "I did the right thing. I couldn't hurt her, Ryan. Not for politics, not for diplomacy, not for anything." "You sound like you care about her," Lisa observed. Jake was quiet for a moment. "She's incredible. Did you see the way she moved? The way she carried herself? She's like a force of nature. But there was something else in her eyes when I hugged her. Something vulnerable and confused. Like she was seeing the world differently for the first time." A commotion outside their door interrupted the conversation. They could hear guards talking rapidly in the Zephyrian language. Then the door opened, and Princess Lyra walked in. She had changed from her armor into a simple dress of silver fabric. Her scales caught the light beautifully, and her golden eyes seemed to glow. She carried no weapons. "Leave us," she commanded the guards. They hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with leaving their princess alone with the humans, but they obeyed. Princess Lyra closed the door and turned to face the human team. "I need to understand what you did to me," she said directly to Jake. Jake stood up slowly. "I didn't do anything to you, Your Highness. I just tried to show you that not all problems have to be solved with violence." "But why?" she demanded. Why would you risk your life to avoid hurting me? We had never met before yesterday. I am nothing to you. That's not true, Jake said softly. You're a living being with thoughts and feelings. You have people who love you and depend on you. Your life has value. Princess Lyra stared at him, as if he had just spoken in an alien language. You believe that? Truly? Of course. Don't you feel the same way about other people? I have never thought about it that way. In our culture, strength is everything. The weak serve the strong. It has always been so. Lisa stepped forward carefully. Your Highness, may I ask you something? Have you ever felt sad when someone you cared about was hurt? Sad? The princess seemed to consider this. Yes, when my brother died in battle, I felt empty, angry. That's empathy, Lisa explained. It's the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. Humans believe it's one of our greatest strengths. But empathy makes you weak, the princess protested. If you care too much about others, you cannot make the hard decisions that leaders must make. Jake shook his head. It doesn't make us weak, it makes us stronger. When people know you care about them, they'll do anything for you. Not because they're afraid, but because they want to help you succeed. Princess Lyra walked to the window and looked out at her city. In the distance, she could see crowds of Zephyrians gathered in the streets arguing about what had happened. My people are confused, she said. Some want to learn about human ways. Others see it as a threat to our traditions. The council doesn't know how to advise my father. Change is always difficult, Jake said, moving to stand beside her. But sometimes it's necessary for growth. The princess turned to look at him. What you did in the arena, this hug, would you show me again? I want to understand it better. Jake hesitated. Are you sure? I don't want to make things worse. For you politically. I am the heir to the throne, she said with a slight smile. I can speak to whoever I choose. Very slowly, Jake opened his arms. Princess Lyra stepped forward hesitantly, like someone approaching a wild animal. When Jake's arms closed around her, she tensed at first, then gradually relaxed. It's warm, she said with wonder. And safe. I feel safe. That's the point, Jake whispered. Sometimes we all need to feel safe and cared for. They stood like that for several minutes. The princess had never experienced anything like this gentle, non-threatening physical contact. It was changing something fundamental in how she saw the world. When they finally separated, her golden eyes were bright with curiosity. I want to learn more about human customs. Will you teach me? Jake smiled. I'd be honored to, Your Highness. Outside, the Zephyrian High Council was still arguing, completely unaware that their princess was beginning a journey that would change both their species forever. Over the next several days, Princess Lyra spent most of her time with the human delegation. She had moved them to a private section of the palace where they could talk freely without being constantly watched by guards and nobles. The princess was fascinated by everything about human culture, but especially by their ways of showing friendship and care. Jake had taught her about handshakes, which she found amusing, but impractical for people with claws. High fives were more successful, though her strength often left Jake's hand stinging. So humans touch each other often? She asked during one of their lessons. They were sitting in a garden overlooking the capital city. All the time, Amy confirmed. We shake hands when we meet someone new. We hug our friends and family. Some people even hug strangers when they're happy or sad. Princess Lyra shook her head in amazement. We only touch for mating or combat. Even family members rarely make contact except during ceremonies. That sounds lonely, Jake said gently. I never thought about it that way before, the princess admitted. But yes, I suppose it is lonely. Sometimes I go days without speaking to anyone except servants and guards. Lisa had brought her portable computer and was showing the Princess videos from Earth. Look at this, she said, playing a clip of children helping an injured bird. These young humans found this creature hurt and spent hours caring for it. The princess watched in fascination as the children gently cleaned the bird's wing and built it a safe place to heal. They gain nothing from this action. The bird cannot repay them. Why do they help? Because it needed help, Jake said simply. That's reason enough. But what if helping the bird put them in danger? What if it cost them something valuable? Many humans would still help, Lisa replied. We call it compassion. It's the feeling that we should reduce suffering whenever we can, even if it costs us something. Princess Lyra was quiet for a long time, thinking about this concept. On her world, helping others was usually done only when you expected something in return. The idea of helping simply because someone needed it was revolutionary. Show me more, she requested. They spent hours watching videos of human behavior. Princess Lyra saw firefighters risking their lives to save strangers, doctors working without pay in poor areas, and ordinary people helping during natural disasters. Each video seemed to surprise her more than the last. This is not possible, she said, after watching footage of humans forming a chain to rescue people from a flood. These people don't know each other. They have no obligation to help, yet they risk themselves anyway. That's what humans do, Jake explained. We're social creatures. We're strongest when we work together and take care of each other. But how did your species survive? If you spend time helping the weak instead of letting them die, wouldn't that make your whole civilization weaker? Ryan laughed. Actually, it makes us stronger. The person you save today might be the one who saves you tomorrow. Or they might invent something that helps everyone. You never know where the next great idea will come from. The princess stood up and began pacing, a habit she had when thinking hard. You're saying that showing mercy and kindness is actually a survival strategy? In a way, yes, Jake confirmed. But it's more than that. We help because it's the right thing to do. Because we can imagine how we would feel in their situation. Empathy. Again, the princess murmured. That evening, Princess Lyra asked Jake to walk with her through the palace gardens. The 3 moons were full, casting silver light over the exotic plants and crystal sculptures. Jake, she said as they walked along a path lined with glowing flowers, I have been thinking about what you showed me, about how humans treat each other. What do you think? Jake asked. I think we may have been wrong about many things. We always believed that strength came from being harder than your enemies, more willing to fight, more brutal in victory. And now? Princess Lyra stopped walking and turned to face him. In the moonlight, her scales seemed to glow with inner fire. Now I wonder if true strength might come from being gentle when you could be harsh, from choosing mercy when you could choose cruelty. Jake felt his heart skip a beat, not just because of her beauty, but because of the intelligence and openness in her golden eyes. That's very wise of you to realize. Is it true that humans sometimes care for people they barely know? That you can feel affection for someone you just met? Jake's pulse quickened. He had been trying not to think about his growing feelings for the princess, knowing how impossible the situation was. Yes, it's true. Sometimes humans connect with someone very quickly, even someone from a different species. Even then, Jake said softly. They stood looking at each other in the moonlight. Princess Lyra reached out slowly, as if she were approaching a dangerous animal. Her clawed hand touched Jake's cheek gently. You are very strange, Jake Morrison, she said. You defeated me without fighting. You made me question everything I believed, and now you make me feel things I have no words for. I feel the same way, Jake admitted. You're the most incredible person I've ever met. You're strong and brave, but you're also willing to learn and change. That takes real courage. The princess moved closer. On my world, touching someone like this means you are claiming them as yours. Is it the same for humans? Jake's breath caught. Not exactly claiming, more like asking if they want to be yours and offering to be theirs in return. And what is your answer to that question? She whispered. Before Jake could respond, they were interrupted by the sound of running feet. Captain Zara appeared around a corner looking panicked. Princess, she called out. You must come quickly. The High Council has made a decision about the humans. Princess Lyra sighed and stepped back from Jake. What decision? They have declared the humans' actions to be a new form of combat called heart fighting. They say he defeated you using emotional weapons, which makes him the winner of the duel. Jake and the princess looked at each other in surprise. That means, Zara continued breathlessly, that by law, the human has won the right to make a request of the royal family. Any request? Princess Lyra's eyes went wide. Any request? Yes, princess. And the council wants to know what he will ask for. They are prepared to offer him gold, territory, or even a position in our military. Jake looked at the beautiful alien princess standing beside him. He thought about everything they had shared over the past few days, the connection he felt growing between them and the impossible situation they found themselves in. I know what I want to request, he said quietly. Both Zephyrian women stared at him. What? Princess Lyra asked, though something in her voice suggested she already knew. Jake smiled and took her hand in his. I want to request permission to court. Princess Lyra, I want to learn more about your culture while I teach you about mine. I want to see if what we're feeling is real. Princess Lyra's golden eyes blazed with joy and something that might have been love. And what if I want the same thing? Then I guess we'll figure it out together. Captain Zara looked back and forth between them with growing understanding and horror. Princess, you cannot be serious. A human. The council will never approve. Princess Lyra smiled, and for the first time since Jake had met her, it was a smile of pure happiness. Then I suppose it's time for our laws to change again. 3 weeks had passed since Jake's unusual victory in the arena. The Zephyrian High Council had reluctantly agreed to let him court Princess Lyra, mainly because they had no legal choice. According to their ancient laws, the winner of a royal duel could request almost anything, and Jake had used his right wisely. The cultural exchange program they had started was causing changes throughout Zephyrian society. Young Zephyrians were particularly interested in human customs like cooperation and peaceful problem-solving. Some of the older nobles were horrified, but they couldn't deny that these new ideas were making their people think in ways they never had before. Jake and Princess Lyra spent every day together, learning about each other's worlds. She taught him Zephyrian history, art, and philosophy. He showed her human music, literature, and the concept of humor, which fascinated her endlessly. So humans make sounds that express joy even when nothing funny has happened? She asked after Jake had explained laughter to her. Sometimes we laugh just because we feel good, Jake confirmed, or because we're with people we care about. The princess tried to laugh, producing a sound like wind chimes mixed with purring. Did I do it right? Perfect, Jake said, grinning. Her attempts at human behavior were adorable, even when they didn't quite work. Today was special. Emperor Veltar had decided to hold a formal ceremony to celebrate the new friendship between humans and Zephyrians. Representatives from both species would exchange gifts and sign treaties. Jake had spent days thinking about what gift to give Princess Lyra. He wanted something meaningful, but not too formal. Finally, he had decided on something simple, but personal. The ceremony was held in the palace's great hall, the same place where Jake had first met the royal family. This time the atmosphere was much friendlier. Zephyrian nobles wore their finest clothes, and the human delegation had dressed in their best uniforms. Emperor Veltar stood before the assembled crowd. Today we celebrate a new beginning, he announced. Our species have found common ground through understanding and respect. Let this day mark the start of lasting peace between our worlds. The crowd cheered. Many Zephyrians had come to appreciate human culture over the past weeks, especially the younger generation. Jake stepped forward when his name was called. In his hands, he carried a small box containing his gift for the princess. Your Highness, he said, bowing to Princess Lyra, I wanted to give you something that represents the friendship between our peoples. He opened the box to reveal a simple bracelet made of braided cord and small beads. It wasn't expensive or fancy, just a friendship bracelet that his 8-year-old niece Emma had made before he left Earth. My niece made this for me to remember home, Jake explained. "But I want you to have it so you'll always remember that humans and Zephyrians can be friends." Princess Lyra's golden eyes filled with tears, something Jake had taught her about during their cultural lessons. She was still learning to express emotions in human ways. "It's beautiful," she whispered, holding out her wrist. Jake carefully tied the bracelet around her arm. The simple gesture required him to hold her hand steady, their fingers intertwining as he worked with the strings. "There," he said softly, not letting go of her hand immediately. "Perfect." The crowd began cheering and throwing flower petals, a Zephyrian tradition for celebrating happy occasions. But Jake noticed that Princess Lyra had gone very still, staring down at their joined hands and the bracelet on her wrist. "Lyra?" he asked quietly. "Are you okay?" Before she could answer, Elder Crix Velnos jumped up from his seat in the audience. His ancient face was a mixture of shock and joy. "Stop the ceremony," he shouted. "By the sacred laws of our ancestors, we have just witnessed a royal engagement." The hall went completely silent. Jake looked around in confusion. "What?" "No, I was just giving her a friendship bracelet." Elder Crix hobbled forward, consulting an enormous book of ancient laws. According to Section 47 of the Royal Marriage Code, when a suitor presents a personal ornament to a member of the royal family while maintaining prolonged physical contact, it constitutes a formal proposal of marriage. Princess Lyra's mouth fell open. "But that law is 3,000 years old. Nobody uses it anymore." "The law has never been changed," Elder Crix said firmly. "It is still valid. And according to tradition, the princess has 30 seconds to accept or reject the proposal." Jake felt like the ground was falling away beneath his feet. "Wait, I didn't mean to propose. I was just being friendly." Princess Lyra looked at him, then at the bracelet on her wrist, then at the crowd of people waiting for her answer. Every eye in the hall was focused on her. "Lyra," Jake said desperately, "you don't have to say yes just because of some old law. I would never want to force you into anything." The princess was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Jake could see her mind working, considering all the implications of what was happening. "Jake," she said finally, "do you remember what you told me about humans making choices with their hearts instead of just their minds?" "Yes," Jake replied, not sure where this was going. "And you said that sometimes the best decisions are the ones that feel right even if they seem impossible?" "I did say that." Princess Lyra smiled, the radiant expression that had been appearing more and more often as she learned to be happy. "Then my answer is yes." The crowd erupted in the loudest cheer Jake had ever heard. Zephyrians were shouting, singing, and dancing. Flower petals filled the air like snow. Jake stood in shock, staring at the incredible woman who had just agreed to marry him. "Are you sure about this? I mean, really sure? Because there's no going back from here." Princess Lyra stepped closer and, in front of thousands of witnesses, gave him the longest, warmest hug in Zephyrian history. "I have never been more sure of anything," she said. "You changed my entire world in 3 weeks, Jake Morrison. You showed me that strength can come from gentleness, that leaders can rule with love instead of fear. If that's not worth building a life on, what is?" Jake hugged her back, lifting her off the ground and spinning her around. The crowd cheered even louder. Emperor Veltar stepped forward, tears of joy streaming down his scaled face. "It seems we have a wedding to plan," he announced. "The first union between a human and a Zephyrian in galactic history." Over the following months, the engagement became the most celebrated event in both species' recent history. Jake learned Zephyrian customs, while Lyra mastered human traditions. Their wedding would blend both cultures, creating something entirely new. More importantly, their relationship had opened the door for other changes. Zephyrian society began adopting human concepts like compassion and cooperation. Human diplomats learned about Zephyrian honor and dedication. Both species became stronger by learning from each other. On their wedding day, as Jake and Princess Lyra stood together before representatives of two worlds, the ceremony included both human vows and Zephyrian battle oaths. But the most important moment came when they exchanged their final promises. "I promise to face every challenge with you," Princess Lyra said, "whether it requires the heart of a warrior or the soul of a peacemaker." "I promise to love you through every difference between us," Jake replied, "and to build a bridge between our worlds with every day we have together." As they sealed their vows with humanity's greatest weapon, a hug that lasted long enough for both their peoples to cheer themselves hoarse, Jake reflected on how one accidentally stepped on carpet had led to the greatest adventure of his life. Sometimes the best battles were the ones you won by refusing to fight, and sometimes the greatest victories came from opening your arms instead of raising your fists. The galaxy would never be the same.